I invite you to turn in your Bibles to Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2. Indeed, we are going to talk today about the visit of the Magi. But you know, yesterday being Christmas, one of the most widely practiced activities yesterday was opening presents. And I hope you got something that you liked. I hope you got something that you wanted. I know I did. I was blessed abundantly, and I hope you were too. But what I want us to see from this story, the visit of the Magi today, is that this was kind of one of those climaxes of human history. In fact, that was when God's greatest gift was actually opened up for the world to see in very visible form. This Christmas season that we celebrate, it's the time when God opened up his gift of redemption to the world. Now, we've talked about this for the last several weeks, that this plan of redemption was not something that, you know, somewhere one day God was sitting around going, oh, you know what, I guess it's probably time we do something, so let me see, what can we do? Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll impregnate a virgin. That'll be incredible. Nobody will believe that. That'll be a pretty wild trick. Let's do that. And, hey, while we're at it, you know, since we're going to do something incredible like that, why don't we go out in the middle of a field in the middle of the night and scare a bunch of shepherds to death with some angels and tell them what's going on? I mean, won't that be a blast? Let's do that. And then, you know, hey, why don't we even include in part of this, God, can't you see God sitting up there in heaven saying, all right, since we're doing all this, why don't we get these guys they're not even Jews. They live all the way on the other side of the desert. Let's send them a private cryptic message through Sister Cleo and all the astrologers. Oh, wait a minute, they weren't astrologers, were they? They were astronomers, or whichever one is the legitimate one. No, you see, God didn't just decide one day, hey, let's be cool, let's do this. From the beginning of time, God had a plan to redeem and to restore this irreparably broken world. In fact, he created it knowing we would break it, and he'd have to fix it, and knowing what he would have to do to fix it. So this that we celebrate during this time of year, and these scriptures that we read pretty much only this time of year for some reason, they are the unwrapping of this plan of redemption. It is God who for hundreds and a couple of thousand years had just been kind of unveiling bits and pieces and hinting about it. Now it was finally time to unwrap the gift and to present it in Jesus. So as we look at this story of the visit of the Magi, I want us to kind of see how the plan unfolds and think about that. Now, when we think about the Magi, let me just kind of take a moment and kind of separate Bible from romantic Christmas legend. Nowhere in the Bible does it say they were kings. They weren't kings. They worked for other kings. They were very wealthy people. They weren't all necessarily stargazing people. This group of people that were called Magi, or as the Hebrews would call them Magoi, these were highly intelligent people who studied highly intelligent things. They were kind of the Mensa group of their day. They were the ones who sat around and who studied ancient literature, and they studied advanced mathematics and advanced science, and these were the real smart people who were charged with solving some of the great mysteries of the world and helping to unfold some of the problems that would encounter their day. Highly, incredibly intelligent men. That's why they were so wealthy. They were rightfully so, well rewarded for their skill and their abilities to contribute to society the way that they did. They came from a land far away, probably somewhere around modern-day Iraq. And they made their way across the desert. We don't know how long it took. We don't know when they left. We don't know exactly when they saw the star, but they did. But the most amazing thing about the story to me, and I hope you don't lose sight of this, they weren't Jewish. Now that's a big deal. Because in Jesus' day, those who were Jewish thought the only ones for whom a Messiah would come, the only ones who had any skin in the game, so to speak, were Jews. Everybody else was just out of luck. It was too bad. But they were God's special people. And God was going to redeem them because, you see, in their mind, this Messiah who was coming was going to redeem them from the rest of the world, who had for years persecuted them and enslaved them and rule over them. This Messiah was going to come and once and for all set Israel up to be the greatest nation that the world had ever known, and they would never lose that again. It was all political and national to them. It was never spiritual to most of them. But from the beginning of time, from the beginning of the story, God planned to include even those who were not Jewish. You see, yes, the Jews were God's chosen people. They were chosen not to be the only people of God. They were chosen to be the people through whom God would send the Redeemer to save the whole world. That's what he told Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12, when he gave Abraham the covenant with him, he said, I will bless you. I will bless those who bless you, and you and your seed will become a blessing to all the people, all the nations. Already foreshadowing that redemption was going to come not just to Abraham's genetic line, but to all the people through Abraham. We don't know that there were three. We traditionally believe there were three because there were three gifts that were mentioned that were given to the baby. We don't know how long after Jesus was born that they came. The Bible doesn't say how long it was. In Matthew chapter 2, where our text will be today, it just says after Jesus was born, in the days of Herod the king. Herod was the king the day that Jesus was born and was the king after Jesus was born for about 5 or 6 years. We don't know exactly when they came. I've got some theories on that. I believe it was probably just a few days after. I can't see any reason why Mary and Joseph would have just kind of hung out in Bethlehem after they had done their business of filing their tax return. I believe otherwise they'd have probably, after the baby was born, been making their way back to Nazareth where they had homes set up already. They wouldn't have just kind of been hanging out in a crowded city for no reason at all. But let's go to the text. Let's read it again. And from that, I want us just to kind of see I want to unwrap in three phases the Christmas story from their perspective. Follow along with me as I read, beginning in verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Can you imagine how that made Herod feel? Wait a minute, what? Who? What? I'm King of the Jews. What do you mean? Who are you talking about here? They said, for we saw his star when it rose, and have we come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. In other words, when Herod ain't happy, nobody's happy. That was the kind of ruler Herod was. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring him word to me, that I too may come and worship him. If the Bible came with editorial notes, you would insert there, wink, wink, nod, nod. Because worship was not as we would find later, his intention at all. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed their own country by another way. Of course, if you read on in the story after they left, God also told Joseph, you don't go back to Nazareth, you head to Egypt. We need to keep you safe. You know the story. But this is the opening of the grand story of redemption. So just kind of follow along with me as we think about it. The first layer of opening. You ever get, by the way, you ever get those presents? Does anybody ever do this to you? Where they wrap a box inside of a box inside of a box, and you have to keep opening and opening and opening till you get. That's kind of the way this story works, all right? So we're going to open the first box, and the first box is this. God reveals his plan of redemption. In verse 2, notice they said, where is he who's been born King of Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, or we saw his star in the east. And what in the world were they talking about? A lot of times scientists have tried to describe several things. They thought maybe it was a comet. I don't know how scientists do this, but they're so smart. Apparently, they can trace back Halley's Comet. Apparently came, some people have said maybe it was that. But when you look at the timing of Halley's Comet, it was way early for that to have been it. And some people talk about the junction of Jupiter and Saturn. Well, you know, that's only happened, as far as we know, about 4 times. By the way, one of those was just fairly recently. I don't know if you actually got to go out and see it. It was kind of cool the way it looked. But it did create a little bit different look in the sky, but when that would have happened, it still wouldn't have been quite around the same time. We try everything we can to explain away a miracle that God took the initiative to reveal something to people in a very special way. You see, that goes against religion as most of us know it. For most people in the world today, religion is all about us trying to find God. It's as if God is hiding somewhere. Every other religion looks at it this way. Whatever they call God, whatever their deity is, those deities are hiding somewhere. And you've got to have special knowledge to know this God, or you've got to unlock some kind of special ritual in order to discover this God. You have to be the one to find God. But the good news about God's plan of redemption, the real God, is that God has clearly made known to us who he is and what he's about. He didn't wait for us to find him. He revealed himself. He revealed himself to these wise men. He revealed himself through something that they would notice, some kind of miraculous thing in the sky that they never had seen before. God took the initiative to reveal his plan of redemption. And that's what Christmas is all about. That he sent his Son into the world, that through him the world might be saved. That in him was life, and life is the light of man. That the Word, Jesus, became flesh and dwelled among us. God, as the song that Jan sang, God poured out into this child himself. How beautiful a picture that is. God revealed himself. God pulled back the curtain. God opened the present. God said, look here, you haven't got to guess anymore. You haven't got to try to figure it out anymore. I'm making it plain. I'm making it evident to you. God reveals his plan of redemption. I want you to know that that is just as real for us today, because so many people are still trying to figure out, how in the world can I get it right? How can I fix my own broken mess? How can I fix my own broken life? How can I make sense of it? And we try this and we try that, and we think, well, you know what? I tried God's way and it didn't work. I'm having much more fun this way. But then when we get into that fun way we think we're having, we realize, well, you know, something's missing there too. I'm just missing something. And we keep looking and looking and looking as if the secret to life is hidden somewhere. It's hidden in more money. It's hidden in a different relationship. It's hidden living in a different place. It's hidden in a different political system, or it's hidden in knowledge and education somewhere. I've just got to learn something. And we look for all of these ways to find it. And God has clearly, plain as day, said it right in front of us. He has hidden it in plain view from us. There it is. And it's in Jesus. All that we're looking for to fix the brokenness of in our own lives and in the world around us, God has clearly revealed it in His Son Jesus. The second box we open up, though, is we learn that, yes, God has revealed His plan of redemption, but we must respond to that revelation. Yes, God has provided salvation, but God did not just, poof, magically make everybody saved. It's just like gifts under a Christmas tree. There can be a gift for you under that tree, and it can be very real, and it could be something maybe you always wanted, but until you take the box and you pull off the bow and you carefully move the paper, fold it up and move it. Isn't that the way you do it at your house? You just carefully, or you rip into it, however it is you do it at your house, and you open the box and you receive the present. That's when it truly becomes your present. Look what the Magi said. We saw His star when it rose, and we have come to worship Him. Yes, they saw the star. They saw that God had revealed something to them. They saw there was something that they were to do. And then what did they do? They didn't just go, hey, look at this great discovery we found. Oh, well, okay, next project. What can we do next? They responded to the revelation that they had. You see, I know people that know the facts about Jesus. They say that they know that Jesus is the Son of God, and they say they know that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And they'll even say with their mouths that he died on a cross and He rose, but they've never responded to the work that Jesus did. They have never in any way stepped out in faith and responded to that and received that gift as their own. They've never personalized that gift and begun to base their life on that gift that's there. You see, it's not just enough to know the story here. The story has to get here. And from here, it's got to get to here. And it's got to get to our feet, and it's got to get out of our mouths, and it's got to get into our lives. It moves from just being head into being part of our heart and our will and our action. We respond to the revelation. What would it have been like? Matthew 2 would have been kind of boring if Matthew just said, well, there were these really smart guys over there in the east, and they studied all this smart stuff, and they saw a star, and they announced to everybody, hey, somebody's been born King of Jews. Y'all need to go check that out. Would have been a pretty boring chapter, wouldn't it? They said, no, we got to go. This has been revealed to us. And because it's been revealed to us, we have a responsibility to act on what has been revealed to us. So let me ask you today, what about the Jesus story have you responded to, and are you responding to today? Is it just a head thing for you? Is it just something nice to talk about? Or, is it nice to have, I believe in Jesus, and we kind of keep that in our pocket so when something goes wrong, we can pull out and say, well, I believe in Jesus so I can pray. And God can get me out of my trouble. How many times does God have to get us out of our trouble before we finally say, you know what, it's about time I let God have me? How many times does God have to heal us before we finally surrender our lives to Him and live for Him? How many times does God have to come through on a financial need before we recognize that, everything I have is His anyway, and surrender it back to Him? How many times does God have to help us get over a broken relationship or heal a bad relationship before we realize that He is, as Ecclesiastes 4, He is that third chord in the band that holds it all together and make him the center of the relationship that we have. At what point do we start responding to this revelation of God's redemption to our life? But then the third box that we open. What is that response? Our response is to believe. We find as we read the story, went and told Herod. Herod sent him on the right path for his dubious reasons. Verse 11, they went to the house. They saw the child with Mary, his mother. And what did they do? They fell down and worshiped him. And their worship, by the way, did you notice what their worship was? Their worship was giving. Now let me just kind of put down a light anchor right here for just a minute. Because we have redefined worship as Christians in the 21st century American church as what we get, not what we give. In other words, if we don't sing the songs I like, it's not worship. If the preacher don't preach the way I like, it's not worship. If it's not in a building I like, it's not worship. If you've never read any Francis Chan, I encourage you to read everything by Francis Chan you can. He will absolutely rattle your heart. He was a pastor in California who basically sold everything that he had and has moved to Hong Kong to be a missionary in Hong Kong. Gave up the easy life to take his family to where they were needed. But anyway, I remember one thing I heard Francis Chan say one time. He said they were leaving church, and he actually had a lady come up to him and said, "Pastor, I just want you to know, I didn't get anything out of worship today." He smiled and said, "Well, that's okay. We weren't worshiping you." Maybe that's why he's in Hong Kong. I don't know. But when you think about it, worship, it's not about us. They worship by bringing something. And not just something. What they brought was incredibly symbolic. It was gold, it was frankincense, and it was myrrh. Now let's break that down just a minute. The fact that they brought gold reminds us that Jesus is the King to whom we owe our allegiance. You see, gold was that kind of gift. Whenever a new prince was born, that prince was very often showered with gifts of monetary value, gold being one of those. And being showered with that gold, they would add that to their treasury. Not only then when they became king would they inherit their dad's fortune, but they had already started collecting their own little fortune, so the idea was that they would eventually be even more powerful and wealthy than their dad when they made it to the throne. So to bring a child gold was to recognize their royalty. Do we really recognize that Jesus is a king to whom we owe allegiance? Think about what Jesus said when he began preaching. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent and believe the good news. In other words, surrender your own kingdom and join my kingdom. That goes against 21st century American democratic society ideals, doesn't it? Because when we surrender our kingdom, we don't get a vote anymore. It's majority rules, but God by himself is the majority. It becomes a theocracy. That's what Jesus calls us to. He calls us to swear our allegiance to him and to live our lives now in his kingdom and for his kingdom and to support his kingdom. He taught us to pray that in the model prayer in Matthew 6. And when he taught us to pray, he said that we should pray, your kingdom, your will be done, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Since you are already the king, then may your will and your desires and your plan be the one that happens through my life. So today we worship, we believe. One of the most important things for us to believe is that Jesus is a king who has inaugurated a new kingdom into which he has invited us to live and to walk, so that we don't live like we want to live. We do like Paul said in 2 Corinthians, because we have been bought by him, we no longer live for ourselves, but we live for the one who gave himself up for us. We live by his will, his wishes, his desire, for his glory and for his honor. They brought him gold, and today we can bring him the gold of our heart by remembering he is our king and ordering our lives under him. But it's also important for us to believe, as we see through frankincense, that Jesus is also the Lord to whom our worship is due. Frankincense was an aromatic powder that was placed in the censers in the temple. And the picture behind the incense was this powder, as it went in there and was burned, there was a very aromatic smoke that came from those censers as it was burned. And the picture was it went up into heaven and that God could smell it. And that it was a smell that pleased God. And that was considered worship. It was a recognition, and that happened in the temple because only God was worthy of smelling that smell. Only God was worthy of that sweetness. Only God was worthy of that very special scent of saying, this is especially for you, the best aroma that we have to offer God. We are allowing it to go into your throne room in heaven, where you can hear it and smell it and enjoy it as we worship you. So it was symbolic that this baby wasn't just soon to be a king, but he was to be Lord. The only one worthy of worship, not self-worship, not the worship of others, not the worship of things. And then we see in the gift of myrrh, it's important for us to believe that Jesus is the Redeemer in whom we must trust. Myrrh was kind of their burial spice. They would completely anoint a dead body with this oil. They would take the cloths that they would wrap the body in and completely soak them. There was something about the chemistry in this particular oil that kept, or deterred at least, the rotting and decomposing of any flesh. It produced a shield, basically, from the outside, so that it would take a long time for a body to decompose, and then as a body did decompose, it would decompose slowly. And you could imagine if you had an area like was a cemetery and there were not things like that, what the aroma, nobody could live anywhere close to it for miles around it. So it had a very practical purpose, but it was also a reminder. Can you imagine that? This would be the equivalent, by the way, of when your grandchild is born, you giving your grandchild a gift of paying off his funeral. That's crazy when you stop and think about that. I mean, to go down here to the funeral home and say, I want to go ahead and pay for arrangements for my grandchild. Well, how old is your grandchild? Well, he was just born yesterday. Well, that's crazy. But it's the equivalent of that. It was as if they were saying, you're a special child. And that was very expensive. Not everybody could afford it, and they wanted to make sure. In their minds, they were doing something very practical, but the picture for us was a reminder that this baby was born to die. He was born with that very specific destiny to die for my sin and for your sin. What stage of belief would you say you're in today? You see, there are times in our life when all of us are gripped with unbelief or misbelief, and we don't believe completely and totally who Jesus is and what he's done. Can I ask you this today? Can you say honestly that Jesus is my King? I've sworn my allegiance to him, and I live every moment of every day to do whatever it is He would have me to do. My life is not my own. I'm not living in my own kingdom. I'm living in His. Can you honestly say that Jesus is the Lord to whom you give worship and declare the one? Worship, by the way, came from the Old English word worthship. To give Jesus worship was to declare His ultimate worth, that He was worth more than anything else in your life, more than any possession, any relationship, any dream, any aspiration. That living for Jesus and surrendering to Him was the most worthy cause you could do in your life. Does He have your worship? Is He your Redeemer in whom you've trusted? As I close today, I just want to offer this appeal to anyone here who may not know Jesus as your personal Savior. Maybe you've been walking around like I do sometimes. You ever done that? Put your glasses up on your forehead and looked all over the house, wondering where your glasses are. And there they are, right there all along. And when you put them on, oh, yeah, now I can see. It may be that you've been living your life with the secret, the answer, the gift, hidden in plain view. You've tried your best to fix your broken life. You've tried to turn over a new leaf. You've tried to do better. You make New Year's resolutions, or maybe not even, maybe mid-year resolutions, or maybe you just decide one day, well, I'm going to do better. I'm going to have better habits, or I'm going to quit this, or I'm going to start this. And you say, well, you know what? If I could just change this. Well, the message of Christmas is that God has revealed the fix. In plain view, it's Jesus. The Bible tells us if we will confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God has raised Him from the dead, we will be saved. What a tremendous truth. To surrender to His Lordship and to confess to Him that we relinquish control of our life and we surrender to Him. Have you done that? I offer you that appeal today, but before you leave today, right where you're sitting, if you'll just call out to God and say, God, I believe. I believe that Jesus is my Redeemer, and I receive His gift of salvation, and I surrender to His Lordship. Maybe you've done that before, but let me ask you this. Are you walking in the kingdom? Are there any divided allegiances in your life right now? Or is He really the King? Is there any divided worship in your life? Is there any hidden idolatry in your life where there's something that you consider more worthy than Jesus? And the way you can do that is by just very practically, how do you spend your time? What do you think about? Are you doing the things that Jesus told you to do? Do you think about the things that point you to Jesus? What about your resources? Are you using your resources to serve Jesus? If not, then something else, you are considering something else more worthy of your time and your thought and your resources. Jesus is calling you today to just believe He is who He said He is. Believe He is who the wise men knew Him to be. That He is the one ultimately worthy of your worship. He is the King. That when you surrender to His kingdom, kingdoms come and go. Kingdoms come and go. Man, if you get a hold of a globe of all the countries from 1990 and compare it to the map today, there are countries that don't exist anymore on that thing. Kingdoms come and go. But His kingdom is forever. When you're walking in His kingdom, you're secure. He's revealed that to you. He has graciously invited you to that kingdom. Our response is to walk with Him.